It was great to be in my youth. Well, this last Monday, it was the 50th commemoration of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And I was fortunate to be able to be there to help. When I saw this ship, I had never seen such an incredible ship in my life. 729 foot, just shy of 2.5 football fields. The most beautiful, glistening ship that was on the lakes. Again, you look at life in different ways that God has blessed you. For me to have been on that ship was just a tremendous blessing. It was the record holder of the Great Lakes. 13 times it broke its own record as far as its haul. What we carried was taconite ore. And that next slide should show taconite. It may look like we were hauling blueberries, but no, we were hauling ore. The Mesabi mines had pretty much been depleted through the war years and in through the 50s. And in the 60s, they came up with a production process of taking ore rock, pulverize that rock, mix it with clay and water, and then it was heated and tumbled, and that came out with what is known as taconite. Taconite was about the size of blueberries. You can imagine how slippery it was, but I guess one thing that I guess I can relate to with this is, again, this was the start of a process. It was taking that raw rock, starting the process of what would ultimately be steel that was used for production. Most of us have on our wrist, or many of us have on our wrist, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. It's a process. We are part of that process. And sometimes it is through heating, sometimes it's through tumbling, but we're a part of that. The ore that was carried by the Fitzgerald from 1958 when it was commissioned to the time of its sinking would have been enough steel to make 7.5 million cars. We were the swiftest ship on the lakes, and like I say, record after record. 1968, they hauled over 30,000 ton, and we broke that record in 69 by a little bit, but again, it was just the most incredible ship that there could have been on the lakes. Bill, if you show the next slide. My job as a deckhand was pretty much self-explanatory. Deckhand, you worked a lot on the deck. We had 21 hatches. And this crane basically put those hatches in place that were probably about 65 foot by maybe 8 foot. So you can imagine the tonnage of those hatch covers. But again, each of those then hatches had 68 clamps. So our job, as soon as we left port, was to take care of that residue that was on the deck from the unloading, because I got on Toledo, so it was unloaded there. We had to get up all these pellets, sweep those up, hose down the deck, and then each of those hatch covers had to be put in place, clamped in place. So again, we had probably about 4 hours work once we left port, just trying to get the ship back in order. One of the other things that you did as a deckhand, general maintenance, but you were also painting, and painting. It was a continual process because, like I say, the ship was known as the Mighty Fitz, the pride of the American side. Toledo is known as the Toledo Express because, again, we had about a 5-day trip going up to Silver Bay, Minnesota, back to Toledo, and again, as I said, it was the swiftest ship that was out there. Next slide basically shows what our route was. Step back here. Not over my ship. But we started out in Toledo, went up through the Detroit River, into Lake St. Clair River, up into Huron, then through here is the St. Mary's River and the Sioux Lots, and then on to Silver Bay, Minnesota, which is located about in here. So that was about a 2-day trip, and again for me, Lake Erie is kind of a polluted lake back then. To see the waters of Lake Superior and see the beauty that was there, it was just an incredible time for me. But on to November 9th. That was the day that the Fitzgerald was loaded. And this was going to be its final voyage of the season. Next slide. This shows what, again, it's still inconclusive exactly what happened to the ship. What caused the sinking. But you can see from what they had showed here, they say 70-mile-an-hour winds. Recently, when I was up there, they said that the new model showed that the winds were probably 80 to 100 miles an hour. They show water over the top of the ship, 12.5 foot. May have been that, who knows? Because again, obviously something you could not measure. But again, they say 25-foot waves, but the Anderson, who was trailing behind them, thought that they were probably closer to 40 to 50-foot waves. The Anderson had encountered 3 waves prior to, Anderson was trailing behind the Fitzgerald, and they believed that it was greater than that. Next slide, please. So on this particular trip, the Fitzgerald actually, rather than Silver Bay, was loaded in Superior, Wisconsin. Normal shipping route would have come around here and then back down into, they were coming to Detroit for this last load. But because the storms had been forecast, they decided, both the captain of the Fitzgerald as well as the captain of the Anderson, take a little more northerly route up through this way, because they thought that they could probably skirt the storm if they went a little further north. But the belief is that, according to the captain of the Anderson, that they may have hit a shoal about the time of Caribou Island. And there was water that was only 11 foot deep at that near part of the island. Again, the storm was now brewing. And again, they were looking at how can we avoid this storm. But they didn't expect that there was going to be 2 storms that were going to come together. And that's what created the tremendous force of these winds. Bob's got notes here, and Bob's got to trim the page. So they altered their course. And again, at that point, as they progressed through that night, they were getting more and more challenges that they faced. These are some of the words that were recorded between the Fitzgerald and the Anderson that was trailing behind them. The captain of the Fitzgerald had said that he was having some listing to the port side. So again, the ship was not running quite as smooth and even as it should have been. Again, perhaps an indication that they hit a shoal where they're taking on some water there in the underside. And the captain did say that the pumps were working, but still, even with the pumps working, it was not sailing as it normally would be. A little bit later, he reported that they had lost their radar. So again, with the Anderson trailing behind them, the Anderson was trying to help guide them through these waters. McSorley, the captain, had reported, we're having water over the deck. Again, that illustration, it showed 12.5 foot waves, perhaps. Perhaps it was greater than that. But water was washing over the deck. Again, they had lost their radar, perhaps some vent covers. If that was true, then water could be coming into the cargo hold. They did find that the cargo hatches were pretty well intact when they went under after the sinking of the Fitzgerald. The captain then said, "In all my years, I have never seen seas like this." Sad part of this voyage is Captain McSorley was well over 43 years in service as a captain or on the seas. This was to be his last voyage. He had learned that his wife had cancer, but he wanted to complete the season so we'd have money for her care. So it was the last voyage of the season. As a seaman, you were given a tremendous bonus if you were out on the lakes for the entire season. So because of that bonus, he wanted to complete the season and get that bonus to take care of her. And then he said, I have never seen seas like this in all my years. Again, over 43 years out on the lakes, I had never seen seas like this. The last recorded message was, we're holding our own. Just want to go back through those, and I want you to, as I read those, think about your own life and how maybe you have faced some of these same things. I've lost my radar. How about those times that, you know what, we're just not sure which way to turn? Do I do this? Do I do that? I've got to make a decision, but it's not clear to me where I'm going. I'm taking on water over the deck. How about those times that, you know what, you're just so overwhelmed? You know, I feel like I'm just going under. I need help. I got to grab onto something. I'm going under. In all my years, I've never seen seas like this. How about for us? We've all got a lot of years behind us. And yet, you know what? There's still things that we encounter. I just wasn't quite prepared for that. And then lastly, we're holding our own. Isn't that typical of us too? You know what? I can fight my way through this. I can do it. I'm holding my own. Those were the last words that were ever recorded from Captain McSorley to the captain of the Anderson. Next slide, please. After those words, this is an image, obviously unknown what that final view was, but all of a sudden the ship was plummeting. It plummeted 530 feet deep into Lake Superior. The Fitzgerald was 17 miles from Whitefish Point, which is where the Shipwreck Museum is. Had they gotten around Whitefish Point, there would have been some shelter, because there's a little peninsula that goes out there. They would have gotten some shelter from the storm. The ship, under normal conditions, would sail at about 14 miles an hour, 15 knots. If they had another hour or so, they could have reached into something that would have been safer harbor. All these things are things that, you know, you say if they hadn't taken the northern route, maybe they wouldn't have, if indeed they did hit some shoals in around Caribou Island. If they had gotten out of there an hour earlier, if they hadn't had to slow down because of the storm, they could have had shelter. But these things are unknown. We never know what we're going to encounter, why we encounter them. I'm going to take you back to my first week on the ship. Got on a Saturday. Sunday, we're out working. Alarm. Lifeboat drill. Man your stations. My roommate said to me, he said, we're on the lifeboat on the starboard side. Follow him over there. You probably remember when you were in school, they had fire drills. What does everybody do? Hey, it's a chance to get out, stand around, you're talking, no big deal. If you've done a cruise ship, you have lifeboat stations. You go there and you stand around talking. Well, I'm this young guy that, you know what, I like swimming in a pool, but I'm looking out these shorelines that are out like this. So I'm taking this lifeboat drill serious. So I said, what do we do? One of the mariners says to me, he said, when you go back to your room, because we had cabin, two deckhands together in a cabin, when you get back to your room, he said, at the end of your bunk, it'll tell you your job. So needless to say, I go back at the end of the day. Yep, I'm the first man on the lifeboat on the starboard side. I'm feeling good. You know, lifeboat says it holds 50, we got 29. I've got a seat. Responsibility, put the plug in. Okay, if we're going to launch this, I want to make sure the plug's in that boat. So, okay, good. Next Sunday comes. Lifeboat drill. Everybody at your station. Well, I'm feeling pretty good. I know what I'm supposed to do. Get to the station, and I said, where's the plug? One of the seasoned mariners said, don't worry about the plug. If we go down, we'll go down like a rock. Reality? It is what happened. Sadly. The thing is those seasoned mariners, it wasn't that he was prophetic. He had reality. Those seasoned mariners knew the risk that was there. Those that had been out on the lakes, they would talk about, the Bradley that had sunk, and different ships that in their career they had known sunk. Over the years on the Great Lakes, 6,000 commercial shipwrecks that are known. Over 30,000 lives lost at sea on the Great Lakes. Great Lakes alone. It's shocking. But with those words that were said, that still ring in my mind, they had a reality. They knew there was a risk. But with that risk, and we all know that, life has that moment that will come, and it's over. Those men, some of those men recognize that. But how do you prepare for something like that? Here we were doing a lifeboat drill. That wasn't where the answer is. The answer was going hand in hand with Jesus.
Amen.
And you know what? That was the important thing that I wish every man on that ship would have known. I don't know if they had that as their lifeboat, but that's what I have as my lifeboat. And you know what? If we can look and we say, the Son of God could walk on water, the Son of God could calm the raging seas, that's the lifeboat that I want to cling to. Bill, if you'll show that last slide. This was the lifeboat, but you can see that there was no saving there. And that is hopefully a lesson we all can remember, and we all cling to what is the true safety, and that is being in the hands of Jesus. Amen. With that, I conclude. I thank you for being a part of this and let me share. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. That was excellent.